he addressed the Republican convention this week. I thought he gave a great speech. A very likable guy, by the way. I think this was a good pick from President Trump. It's going to be hard for the left to despise him. For everybody out there who don't know, J.D. Vance wrote Hillbilly Elegy. It's about working class America, growing up basically as a hillbilly with a drug addicted mother. His grandmother raises him. And he was the hero to the left. Those on the left loved this book and the movie that came out on Netflix, and now all of a sudden he becomes a Republican. They despise this guy, but he's a likable guy. But for our purposes, he also has a keen focus on China and the problems with the CCP. So this is J.D. Vance at the convention.
Never in my wildest imagination could I have believed that I'd be standing here tonight. I grew up in Middletown, Ohio. A small town where people spoke their minds, built with their hands, and loved their God, their family, their community, and their country with their whole hearts. But it was also a place that had been cast aside and forgotten by America's ruling class in Washington. When I was in the 4th grade, a career politician by the name of Joe Biden supported NAFTA, a bad trade deal that sent countless good jobs to Mexico. When I was a sophomore in high school, that same career politician named Joe Biden gave China a sweetheart trade deal that destroyed even more good American middle-class manufacturing jobs. When I was a senior in high school, that same Joe Biden supported the disastrous invasion of Iraq, and at each step of the way, in small towns like mine in Ohio or next door in Pennsylvania or Michigan, in states all across our country, jobs were sent overseas and our children were sent to war. And
Joe must go. Okay, so in the end, what he's saying is we've got to stop sending manufacturing jobs overseas, and particularly to China or south of the border, in particular to Mexico and other South and Central American countries. I agree with him on all of this. The bottom line is if we could bring manufacturing jobs back to the United States and get less reliant on China, this begins the process of decoupling from the CCP, Ayla.
Exactly. But I do foresee lots of challenges in moving the manufacturing from China to the United States. People purchase goods from China because of the low price, right? Because of a very cheap price, and the cheap price comes with the price of underpaid, laborers, of underpaid, of underage laborers in China, and all of these issues are essential problems here in the United States. The reason that the Chinese Communist Party had an advantage in price was because no one cares about the labor issues in China. And that was a complete different scenario in the United States. So when policymakers, when Vance, advocated for moving manufacturing jobs from China to the United States, the problem is that, by only increasing tariffs or by only moving the factories from China to United States will not directly resolve the pricing issues. The problem here is that the CCP will still be able to have a way to set up factories in other countries, meaning in Vietnam or in other, Asian countries, in the name of the factories are now replacing its location from China to other countries. But in fact, that the controller or the owner or the same labor issue problems will still be caused or linked to the Chinese Communist Party. So if we look at the manufacturing, issues right here, I think that echoes with CCP's essential strategies in the past few decades. They want to change the structure of the United States production. By holding your manufacturing, they would be able to manipulate your market.
Yeah. And so, again, getting back to what J.D. Vance says, this is all about returning all of this to America. And until we do that, all of the things that you're spelling out, China will just continue to prosper at the expense of Americans. Would you agree?
Exactly. At the expense of Americans, at the expense of hardworking Chinese citizens as well.
Yeah.
Because remember, when they're producing goods, they're not being paid very well. Lots of the laborers are underwaged without even reporting to, local government. And many of these laborers has been very, very cheap. And they have been, living in a condition where air pollution, water pollution, and food pollution exists everywhere. They have been sacrificing, their bodies in order to produce cheap goods for the CCP.
Let me play for you another clip. This was J.D. Vance when he was on with Fox News Sunday, talking about China, talking very similar about what we're talking about and what he just mentioned at his acceptance speech. But take a listen to this.
And some of the very people who shipped America's manufacturing base overseas to China in the first place, who weakened our ability to manufacture our own weapons, are now the same people who saying we can get involved in 3 wars at once. The math doesn't make sense. We're stretched too thin. We've got to focus. And the last point I'll make on this is if we focus on East Asia, if we focus on containing the Chinese, the Europeans can step up in Europe. Germany still, after Donald Trump demanded it, still doesn't spend 2% of GDP on defense. A lot of the NATO countries have allowed their own industrial might to atrophy. So why are Americans subsidizing European security? We should be focused on our own problems, and that's mostly China.
All right. So in many respects, it sounds a lot like President Trump because, yes, he's focused on China. But it's not just us to focus on as well. Europe has to do its part. All these other nations that are so reliant on the United States also have to do their part, Ayla.
Absolutely. And I felt fascinated that Vance actually speak about those 3 wars together, because that's one of the CCP's core strategy, that CCP is betting on the United States will not be able to resolve 3 wars at the same time. And this was exactly, what Vance was talking about. And I think that he was correct. United States should focus on itself, to resolve the essential issues against the Chinese Communist Party. If you resolve the issues with the Chinese Communist Party, the rest issues will be very easy, for you to look at the nature of the problems. And today, as the election approached, I think CCP's involvement and interfere and CCP's aggression will be stronger and stronger to distract the United States and to further intervene into the results of the election.
Yeah, I think you're correct on that. I mean, look, the bottom line is they interfere with everything. I mean, and it does nothing surprises me. I mean, even today, look what we're looking at. We're looking at these airline situations that is totally. So all the airlines are shut down, basically. You've got banks shut down. You've got emergency response situations shut down. They're saying it's a software glitch with CrowdStrike and Microsoft Windows. But I don't believe anything anymore. I don't. When Southwest went down, I was worried that was a cyber hack. They said no. It seems like all of these things are happening more and more often. I guess we can take them at their word that it's a cyber attack, but in the end, I'm not sure I necessarily believe it because China's aggression, certainly, I would not put anything past them of doing something like this. Ayla, would you?
Yeah, exactly. And I think, with all of the CCP's aggressive tools and technology in monitoring phones of policymakers and president's candidates, all of these could be, easily mastered by the Chinese Communist Party to obtain information and data and to analyze and to react with, new strategies coming out from the Chinese Communist Party. Cyber attacks are very, very common. You look at New Federal State of China, you look at, Mile School, all of the disinformation campaigns takes place at all times. So I would assume that the same will apply to all of the presidency candidates.
Yeah. Let me play one more clip for you for J.D. Vance. This is on Face the Nation talking about China. Here we go.
On this question, Europe and China and the intertwinement between those two. Look, the reason Europe has become weaker is because they've deindustrialized. And why have they deindustrialized? Because they pursued a green energy agenda following the lead of the Biden administration, and that necessarily empowers China and Russia. We need to acknowledge that it's our decisions that are making these countries stronger. We need to fix that, not whine at countries that have 10 million people.
Or people just like cheap stuff no matter where they live, right? So, and they look for cheaper providers.
Well, they'd love to have cheap energy in Europe, and they don't have it because of the policies of the green energy lobby.
I want to ask.
So it's interesting. Margaret Brennan raises an interesting point. I don't trust her. She's a total leftist. But people do love cheap stuff. And it is not a secret, Ayla Wang, with the New Federal State of China, that we get stuff cheaper from China than in many respects than we can make it here. And I believe that is in large part because of Democrat policies. When you look at industries being overrun with unions and holding business owners hostage for the price of wages going up and everything surrounding the workforce. When you look at energy and refusing to drill, sending the price of everything up, up, and up. When you look at the over-regulatory process of American government and what it puts and requires of American businesses, it makes it very hard to compete. Forget about what China's doing. And I mean, look, I don't want to forget, but forget about what China's doing. We're killing ourselves here. And sometimes I wonder, like, how do we even focus on China yet? We got to get our own house in order. Ayla.
Right. I think that was exactly correct. With all of the issues that we've already observed in this country, I think business owner does have a very, a narrow path in strengthening its own business and expanding, its operations. To be honest, in China, it's the same. But the difference is that in China, business owners use money, use bribery, to expand their paths, so that some of the business owners were able to expand their operations or able to profit from their own business. But that's the difference in the United States. The problem here today is that all of the cheap goods that people like and people purchase in supermarkets today and that were produced in China, that was on the sacrificing of all of these unpaid laborers and forced labor. Some of them might even be living in Xinjiang concentration camps as well. And so if we look at that, on the one hand, that we want to be politically correct. We want to be taking more actions against the Xinjiang concentration camp, against the massacre that the CCP had committed. On the other hand, we have been importing these cheap goods, from China, and that will also strengthen CCP's ability to, to expand its powers and to expand its factories to have more unpaid laborers and underage laborers. So I think. Overall, I think decoupling is still very essential. Making effective policies by knowing, what the CCP has been doing to its own citizens was also very important, because it was not the only, it's not an easy solution just to move factories from China to United States. It's also to understand the logic and the tactics of the Chinese Communist Party. They have been implementing against the United States for decades, and they've managed to do that. And that was for a reason, because CCP understands the system of the United States. They've already found weak points and utilized these weak points to conduct a fake economy against this country.
Yeah, they sure have, and they're doing it in many respects with some success, which is what's really sad.